Hi, so the aim today is to explain the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, the R.A.A.S. I hate this so much and I always have to come back to it, so I think it's a valuable thing to cover for myself and for anyone else struggling with it. The main two things, the aim of the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system is to increase blood pressure and to increase blood volume. Excuse me. So how does this work? Angiotensinogen is made in the liver, and what happens is the kidney produces an enzyme called renin. So it's important to know that renin is an enzyme and it's not a hormone, and so what it does is it acts on angiotensinogen and it chops off the O-gen so that it can become angiotensinogen 1. Okay. So that's the premise for the first stage of what the R.A.A.S system does. What I find helpful is if you break down a word into its component parts, so you don't really have to remember it, you just have to translate it. So what I mean by this is O-gen just means inactive, it means precursor. So angiotensinogen is an inactive precursor in the liver for angiotensinogen. So anytime you see the suffix ogen, you can think, this is the inactive precursor substance. Angio is blood vessels and tensin is pressure. One of the aims that we said for the R.A.A.S system was to increase blood pressure. So this is a precursor, an inactive protein that acts on the blood vessels, angio, to increase pressure, tensin. So then onwards on the journey, we have our angiotensin 1 and it turns into angiotensin 2. And it does this with an enzyme from the lungs. So it's called angiotensin converting enzyme. Comes along, turns 1 to 2. So we're not really focused, we don't really care about angiotensin 1. What we like is angiotensin 2, because that's the main player in the game of the R.A.A.S system. But what's worth noting here is that angiotensin converting enzyme stands for A.C.E. So if you've heard of A.C.E. inhibitors, it's just worth keeping in your brain that A.C.E. inhibitors, that's what this is acting on. It's inhibiting this enzyme. Okay, so we've come to the end of the journey, which is angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 has 3 main effects. So what it does is it acts on the blood vessels to cause general vasoconstriction, and this increases blood pressure. So how does it do this? If you think about a tube full of liquid, if the tube is getting smaller, well, the pressure inside the tube with the same volume of liquid is going to increase. The second thing that angiotensin 2 does is that it acts on the brain, and it acts on the pituitary gland within the brain. So the pituitary gland is shape-wise, it looks like the bollocks of the brain, and there is a front one and a back one. So an anterior one and a posterior one. So what happens is angiotensin 2 causes release of this hormone called antidiuretic hormone from the posterior, the back part of the pituitary gland. And what this does is it causes increased water retention, and therefore if you've got more water in your system, you've increased your blood volume. So that was the second aim that we wanted to do. The third thing that angiotensin 2 does is it goes back to the kidneys, and it acts on the kidneys, but it acts on the adrenal gland that sits on top of the kidney, and it tells the adrenal gland that sits on top of the kidney to release aldosterone. What aldosterone does is it increases sodium retention. So it draws sodium back into the body. And there's a YouTuber that I really like called Dr. Matt and Dr. Mike. They're Australian, and they always say, wherever sodium goes, water follows. And so that's what's happening here, is that you're retaining sodium in the body, therefore you're retaining water in the body, and you are increasing blood volume. So, in summary, the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, its aim is to increase blood volume and to increase blood pressure. So, angiotensinogen is made in the liver, renin from the kidney comes along, chops off the OGEN and turns it into angiotensin 1. Then angiotensin converting enzyme comes from the lungs, acts on this to turn it into angiotensin 2. This has then 3 effects. It causes vasoconstriction of blood vessels, and what that does is it increases blood pressure, one of our aims. It acts on the brain, particularly on the posterior pituitary, so it secretes antidiuretic hormone, ADH. What this does is it increases water retention, which therefore increases blood volume. That's our second aim. And the third thing that angiotensin 2 does is it acts on the adrenal gland of the kidney to release aldosterone, which causes sodium retention, and this in turn increases blood volume. Woo! I hate this system. I hate the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system. I really do. It destroys my soul.